Hi, I'm Ami from Ami's Art. I would like to show and explain you in real time how I drew one of the eyes of this white cat. One eye is already completed and now I'm starting the second one. As a first step, I always erase a little bit my initial sketch because otherwise it may be still seen once we add color pencil layers on top. And then I'm starting to map out the shape of the eye. I'm using Polychromos dark indigo for this because we have a blue eye and also the outlines of this eye seem to have a little bluish touch. So dark indigo from the Polychromos range should be just perfect. I'm definitely taking my time for this step because I want the proportions to be 100% right. So this is a very important step, and so take your time and just try to get it 100% right. And once I'm sure the shape is right, I can darken the darker bits, the outlines a little more by just adding another line, another layer on top. But be careful towards the right side, towards these eyelids. Colors are becoming pretty light, so please only use very light pressure on there. This line is dark from the outline of the iris, but the outlines of the eyelids are pretty light. And let them fade out towards the right angle of the eye. Here I'm also imitating a bit the beginning of the fur texture by teeny tiny strokes. And then as before, I'm doing also the reflection and the pupil, just drawing around them, mapping out their outlines. By the way, the full tutorial of this white cat is on my Patreon. Of course, it's also in real time, just as this little clip and with voiceover instructions. I would absolutely love to meet you on Patreon, and there are hundreds of hours of real-time tutorials with voiceover instructions. And there are also all kinds of animals you can imagine, so dogs, horses, cats, wildlife, birds, really every kind you can imagine. And then of course we are adding color immediately to the pupil, working with a few layers until we can go dark enough. So one layer and then immediately another darker layer on top. And finally around the pupil we are adding also a few of the darkest details of the iris. Some tiny strokes. Ready for the coloring. So I'm starting off now with the reflection itself by adding a little hint of pH tallow blue on the bottom part, and then the base color for the iris is added with light cobalt turquoise, and light pressure only is used, just as before, filling in the whole area. And then another second layer which is still a little bit darker and adds the very first shading. Here on the bottom part the iris is darker, and also on this second eye we have a kind of a darker bluish ring around the pupil, and so I'm adding the base layer, another darker layer for this darker ring around the pupil right now. And then of course we need pH color blue again, and we are starting to map out the details of the iris, also making this darker, brighter bluish ring darker. So darkening this whole ring. And the upper shadowy part. And I'm also adding a few light details already, mapping them out. And then we also need this little greenish touch again, so here is cobalt green, just adding it on top, a bit here on this bottom part. And a bit more here, going darker with that bright bluish ring as well. And then of course it's time to go darker again. So here is our Helio Blue Reddish, and we are adding the darker details right now. Luminance Dark Indigo, of course, is used for the very dark parts again, just darkened a bit this lower outline. And then I think I need to switch back to my lighter blues, going a bit darker here with the upper outline, but it's not super dark, so I'm using pH Tallow Blue here, combined with a tiny bit of Helio Blue Reddish. And then this angle needs to be a bit darker as well. And a bit here, but only on the top part. So also the outline of the iris has a very subtle shading. It's not always the same color. Sometimes it's very dark and sometimes it's a little bit lighter. pH Tallow Blue, pushing the blues a bit more. Also with Helio Blue Reddish, the details. And then of course the pupil needs to be darkened a lot more. So here is Luminance Dark Indigo one more time. One more correction on this eyelid. But then back to Dark Indigo and making this pupil really dark. Pushing also a few of the very dark details of the iris next to the pupil a little bit more. So there is not really a hard outline of this pupil. it's all a very soft and gentle transition from dark into light colors. So we are adding that little shadow under the upper eyelid by applying a bit of Polychromos Dark Indigo blended with pH Tallow Blue. So I'm basically using only the lighter blues for blending here. It's not really necessary to use white. Of course you can use those, work with white as a blending pencil, but white of course lightens up your blues a lot and also takes a bit of the brightness off. So I personally preferred to use blues for blending as well. And now onto the eyelids, same colors, a bit of pink metallic goes in here again with light pressure applied only. And of course we also need a bit of Luminance Ultramarine Violet again for going a little bit more purplish and defining the shading, so the angles are a little bit darker than the middle part, the angle of the eye. So this blends and makes it darker at the same time. And for the lightest point in the middle, I'm using a little bit of white again for blending. And then just pushing my pinks up a little bit more with pink metallic. A bit more ultramarine violet for the shading. And finally pushing the very darks with dark indigo. Only on the upper and the lower angle, and that's it then. Bit more pink metallic here to the left angle. Ultramarine violet on top as before. And finally a bit of dark indigo. And then a few more last adjustations going in, pushing the greens a bit more here, layering it on top of my outlines, the lighter outlines of the iris, and making this bottom part of the iris a little bit darker with cobalt green. But these are just some very, very fine and light adjustations. We are almost done. Cobalt green again. And a bit more pH Tallow Blue, going still a bit brighter with those blues here. Blended, if necessary, with light cobalt turquoise. And finally pushing the shadow a little more here. That's it. And as I said at the beginning, if you like to draw the whole white cat with me, you are welcome to join my Patreon. By the way, also the second cat you can see in this picture is available as a tutorial. So hope to see you there. Bye bye and stay healthy.